We begin in the Queen City with the Bengals and Jaguars as the Cincinnati Bengals beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 31-27 for the Jags. Trevor Lawrence, he went 24-42. He threw for 271 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. For the Bengals, Jake Browning replaced Joe Burrow. Browning went 21 for 32. He threw for 241 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Jamar Chase was balling. He had 14 receptions, 165 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. So, first and foremost, I have to give a big shout out to the city of Cincinnati because tailgating was lit downtown yesterday. If you had a chance to make it downtown, it was lit in the city of Cincinnati. I am not a Bengals fan whatsoever, but I enjoyed myself at the Bengals tailgate for their first home game of the season. It was a tremendous, tremendous experience. And honestly, I'm going to talk about Joe Burrow here in a minute, but Joe Burrow is the reason why Bengal fans are able to have so much fun at tailgating. Now, with that being said, obviously, in this game, Joe Burrow, he had to leave the game in the second quarter, and he was diagnosed with a grade 3 toe injury. They diagnosed him with turf toe, and he will need surgery. He is expected to miss 3 months. He was seen in a walking boot and on crutches after the game. And so I was watching the game on the Banks, and on the Banks, they have the game on the big screen. And I'm sitting there watching the game, and everybody was pumped up. It's the Bengals' first home game of the season. Bengals are already 1-0. And right after Joe Burrow went down with his toe injury, you could hear a pin drop in the crowd. And it was very deflating for Bengal fans, and I'm sure it was extremely deflating for Bengal fans that were inside of Paycor Stadium. And so, obviously, the Bengals did end up winning the game. They won 31-27. But, to me, I feel like we lost as NFL fans losing Joe Burrow because not only did the Bengal fans and the Bengals organization lose Burrow, we as NFL fans lost Burrow as well because they're saying 3 months. I think Burrow's going to be out for the season. I think they're just saying that because they want to give fans some hope and have fans remain optimistic that he can possibly return. But I think he's going to be out for the remainder of the season. And to me, there are 4 quarterbacks in the NFL who are the top tier quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. And if any of those 4 quarterbacks that I just named miss any significant amount of time, to me, not only do the fan bases lose, but the entire NFL. We love watching our elite quarterbacks battle against each other. Joe Burrow versus Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson. We see that in week 1 on Sunday Night Football. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson both score 40 points apiece. So anytime we have an elite quarterback miss significant time, not only does the team lose in that situation, but we as NFL fans lose as well. Now, I want to talk about the blame game, and we have to talk about, since Burrow's now probably going to be out for the season, who do we blame for this situation happening? So obviously, you look at 3 counterparts for me. I'm going to start off with Zach Taylor. The reason why I feel like Zach Taylor deserves some of this blame, he's going to get 33% from me, because to me, Zach Taylor and his play style and the Bengals offense, to me, is a offense in which Joe Burrow drops back to pass. They don't really have much of a running game. Let's be honest. With T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, the Bengals do not have much of a running game, and their defense is bad. And so because the Bengals defense has been bad the last 2 years, majority of the time, the Bengals are trailing in football games. So you have to drop Burrow back to pass. And to me, considering their offensive line is not elite, then it puts Joe Burrow in a very, very bad, precarious situation in which things happen like this, what happened yesterday. And the thing is, they don't have a quick passing game. I don't see Zach Taylor, with his creativity, designing plays to have a quick passing game. Joe Burrow is dropping back to pass, and he's dropping back in a multi-drop back system, and you don't have the O-line to be able to do that. And Joe Burrow does not have the mobility like a Josh Allen or like a Lamar Jackson to be able to offset a bad offensive line and be able to make plays. He doesn't have that mobility. So I think Zach Taylor's play style as a play caller and a head coach needs to change. It needs to change. I don't see Jamar Chase or T. Higgins ever running any slants. Can somebody tell me? It seems like Zach Taylor just tells Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, go out there and get open. And we know Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are two of the most talented receivers we have in the NFL, and they still can get open. And Burrow is a great quarterback who can get them the football. But Zach Taylor needs to be more creative with his offensive schemes. You can't drop Burrow back to pass on a 5-6 step drop back. You can't do it because Joe Burrow's not a elite mobile quarterback. Does he have some mobility? Yes, but he doesn't have the mobility like a Lamar or a Josh Allen to offset that weak offensive line. So I give Zach Taylor 33% of the blame. I also give Joe Burrow 33% of this blame. I watched Tom Brady in his prime multiple years in New England and while he played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the end of his career. I watched Tom Brady. Whenever a defender would make a move or he was close to being sacked, Tom Brady always fell to the ground. He always fell to the ground. We've never seen Tom Brady take major hits. And that's why Tom Brady was able to play for 20-plus seasons. Joe Burrow, since he's been in the NFL, Joe Burrow, to me, does not get rid of the football when he's supposed to. Sometimes Joe Burrow sits back in that pocket and these defenders, they're just teeing off against Joe. They're teeing off on Joe. Joe has to learn to accept when the defense has won the down and just live to fight another day. I remember in the preseason game against the Commanders, there was a play where Joe Burrow was back there running around, and it's a preseason game. You can literally hear Joe Buck on the ESPN call saying, go down, Joe. It's only August. Like, Joe Burrow has to do a better job when he does return back to the field of avoiding big hits. He takes way too many unnecessary hits. Joe, learn to slide. Learn to accept the defense won this particular down. Let me live to fight another day and take the sack. He stands too long in the pocket to me and doesn't get rid of the football like he's supposed to. So he gets 33% of this blame as well. Now, the other 33% goes to the Bengals offensive line. Now, I've seen people since Burrow got injured yesterday, it's been overreactions. And it's been people that's been saying like, oh, the Bengals organization deserves blame. The Bengals organization, they are not investing into the offensive line for the football team. While I agree that the Bengals have had a history of not investing into their quarterbacks, like I feel like in the Carson Palmer era, in the Andy Dalton era, the Bengals did not invest into their franchise quarterbacks. But that has not been the case with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow told the Bengals in the offseason he wanted T. Higgins back. They re-signed T. Higgins. He wanted Jamar Chase back. They re-signed Jamar Chase. And he wanted Trey Hendrickson back as well, and they brought back Trey Hendrickson as well. And not only that, the Bengals have also they've tried to improve that offensive line. They brought in veteran guard Dalton Reisner, signed Lucas Fitzpatrick. They drafted Dylan Fairchild and Jalen Rivers. They brought in Amarius Mims. They drafted him last year. They brought in Orlando Brown, former Kansas City Chief. So to me, fans are 100% wrong when they keep saying the Bengals are not trying to improve their offensive line. But the offensive line still is not very good. So two things can be true. The Bengals organization, they can be trying to make improvements on that offensive line, but that doesn't mean that the offensive line has gotten better. Sometimes things just don't work out. You have great intentions, but sometimes it doesn't work out. We've all been in relationships. We had great intentions going into that relationship, had great intentions going into that marriage, and it did not work out. And it's something that you just have to take with a grain of salt. I think Joe Burrow's injury, for the most part, was a freak injury. But when things like this happen, you do have to give some blame, and I think it's 33% for the offensive line, 33% for Joe Burrow, and 33% for Zach Taylor. So those are my thoughts on Joe Burrow getting injured. Now let's talk about whether or not I believe the Bengals can actually make the postseason without Joe Burrow. I know Jake Browning a few years ago. He came in when Joe Burrow got injured, and he helped the Bengals win a few games. And so far in his career, Jake Browning, he has 14 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 2,177 passing yards with a 68.1 rating. But let me be very clear. The Cincinnati Bengals season is officially over. And the reason why the Cincinnati Bengals season is over is three reasons. Number one, the Bengals defense, although they only gave up 16 points to the Cleveland Browns and they gave up 27 points to the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Bengals defense still, to me, is not an average defense. They do lead the NFL with interceptions. But the two teams that they went up against in the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars are not elite offensive football teams. They're not. To me, you are only as good as the competition that you're going to be facing once you get into the playoffs. Teams like the Baltimore Ravens, possibly the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Buffalo Bills, the Houston Texans. I want to see how they play the Denver Broncos in week 4. I want to see how the Bengals perform defensively against those teams before I actually say the Bengals have improved defensively. I'm not ready to say the Bengals are a better defensive football team because they got some interceptions against the Browns and the Jaguars. Neither the Browns or the Jaguars have an elite quarterback, nor do they have elite skill position players. I love Travis Hunter, but Travis Hunter's not an elite receiver yet. And so for me, I don't think their defense is good enough to offset the loss of a Joe Burrow. Number two, Zach Taylor to me is not an elite head coach. I watched last year. Y'all know I'm a Packers fan. I watched Jordan Love. He got injured and missed like 3 or 4 games for the Packers last year. And Matt LaFleur brought in Malik Willis, and the Packers were able to win football games in Jordan Love's absence because of Matt LaFleur and his elite play designs and creativity offensively. He put Malik Willis in positions to be successful, and that's exactly why the Packers were still able to make the playoffs despite losing Jordan Love for 3 or 4 games last year. I don't see that in Zach Taylor. I don't. Does Zach Taylor know offense? Yes. He's forgotten more football than I'll ever know. But to me, he's not an elite head coach like a Matt LaFleur, like a Sean McVay, like a Kyle Shanahan. He's not an elite offensive mind in that way. He knows his offense, but he's not elite to offset losing his elite quarterback. And to me, I think there's been times over the years in the Joe Burrow era where Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins have bailed out Zach Taylor. And now he doesn't have much margin for error considering he no longer has a top 4 quarterback in the NFL. So those are 2 of my reasons why I believe the Bengals season is over. And one more thing, and this is unfortunate. I hate that I have to do this, but it's the truth. It is officially time to begin the conversation about Joe Burrow being an injury-prone quarterback. Let's go over some of these injuries since Joe Burrow came into the NFL. This is college and the NFL. August of 2017, right hand broken bone. January of 2020, left rib torn cartilage. November of 2020, left knee, he tore his ACL. That's the year he tore his ACL. December 2021, right pinky dislocation. February 2022, right knee MCL sprain. July 2023, right calf strain. November 2023, right wrist torn ligament. That was a year where the Bengals were like 3-4 or 4-4. And remember the Thursday night game against Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, and Joe Burrow tried to go to the sideline. He couldn't throw the football. And then he obviously had the turf toe injury. I believe Joe Burrow is a top 4 quarterback in the NFL, and he was a great quarterback for LSU, and he won a national championship. And I believe if he continues to actually be on the field, he will have a Hall of Fame career. Make no mistake about it. But he is an injury-prone quarterback at this point in his career. And we got to ask the question, will he be this generation's Andrew Luck? We saw Andrew Luck retire prematurely. I remember waking up one day and Andrew Luck just decided, I'm done. I no longer want to play football anymore. And so if you are a Bengal fan, if you are the Bengals organization, it's something that you have to keep in mind. It's something that you got to keep in mind. And so I believe as great as Joe Burrow is, and when he plays, Joe Burrow is elite. But you can start the conversation about whether or not he's an injury-prone quarterback, because it seems like every other year, Joe Burrow is dealing with a significant major injury that's forcing him to miss a lot of time. And right now, Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, they are in their prime. This is their Super Bowl window. And unfortunately, they're not going to have their star quarterback for the 2025 season. And I think they're going to miss the playoffs because of it. But those are my thoughts on the Joe Burrow, Cincinnati Bengals situation. And before I get out of here real quick, man, this dude, Trevor Lawrence, has regressed. He was terrible against the Bengals yesterday. I was watching that game, and I'm thinking, like, oh, the Jazz got a chance to win this game. They got a chance to win this game. And this is since 2021. Trevor Lawrence is tied with Josh Allen for the most games with 2 interceptions. He has 13 games with a minimum of 2 interceptions. And so for me, Trevor Lawrence has regressed. He's regressed. And he's not in that conversation with the C.J. Strouds of the world, the Jordan Loves of the world, the Jaden Daniels of the world, the Brock Purdy's of the world. Trevor Lawrence is not in that conversation anymore. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, as an organization, they need to be evaluating about whether or not Trevor Lawrence is going to be their future franchise quarterback after this season. Because this is the second year in a row where Trevor Lawrence has shown regression. That was one of my biggest takeaways from that game as well. But big shout out to the Bengals for pulling that game out. Jake Browning had a game-winning drive on the last possession, showed a lot of resilience after throwing those 3 interceptions. But the Bengals, to me, their season is officially over because they lost Joe Burrow.